Hi, I'm Sarah Connell and I work with Green Style Creations, and I also blog at sewingwithsarah.com, and I'm excited to be back in So English Sew-Alongs, joining you for a quick sew-along for the Express tank. I don't know about you, but I've spent the last couple of weeks sewing pants and coats and all kinds of complicated projects that are rewarding but kind of exhausting. And so a quick and easy tank was just what I needed to kind of get my sojo back after all of those projects. So I'm not sure if you're in the same boat, but if you are, or if you just need something quick to sew for yourself, this is a really great option. It uses less than a yard of fabric and it whips together pretty fast. But I think despite it being a pretty simple pattern, there's also a lot of fun techniques that I hope to show you along the way. So if you're ready, we'll get started. Before you start this video, hopefully you've checked out the previous video, which covers downloading your pattern and how to print with the layers feature and how to assemble your pattern. Green Style pages are no trim, so you're just overlapping them. So that's an important process to have before you're ready to do this. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the pattern in general, about the options, and about sizing, and we're going to actually cut our fabric. So what I want to do first is talk about sizing, because before we are ready to cut our fabric, we need to know what size we should use. Now the Express tank is a pretty flexible pattern. The way that the pattern overlaps in the back and or ties at the back hip is allows for a lot of flexibility in terms of fit. So I would say that the most important thing when selecting your size for this pattern is to go by your bust measurement. Now, if your bust and your hip or waist measurements fall into drastically different sizes, you may want to consider grading out a little bit, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. But the most important thing is your bust measurement to get started. Now, you do want to do a little bit of planning before you take your bust measurement, because our bust measurements tend to be different depending on the type of bra that we're wearing. So I have Express tanks that I have made as athletic tanks, and I generally like to wear sports bras under my athletic tanks. So you want to make sure, if that's what you're planning on doing, that you're wearing a sports bra when you go to measure yourself, because your measurements in a sports bra are typically going to be lower than if you're wearing a regular bra. Now, this Express tank I made to be kind of a flowy, fun, flirty summer top. So I'm wearing a little lacy bralette with this, and the Express tank is wonderful for that, showing off those cute little bralettes that have been really popular lately. So if that's something you love to wear, then you could wear that and make that type of Express tank. But you just want to do a little bit of planning in advance. So once you've kind of got the right type of bra on, you're going to grab your tape measure. Now, a little quick tip about tape measures. I had a really old tape measure, and this might be partly because I have small children that like to pull on my tape measures, but I noticed that my measurements were kind of getting bigger, but I didn't feel like my clothes were fitting any tighter. And so I went out and I bought a new tape measure, and lo and behold, my measurements are the same as they've always been. So that's just a little tip for you if you feel like your old tape measure has gotten stretched out a bit. It is, it can get stretched out. So that's something to kind of consider. But now we're going to take our bust measurement. Now we want to take it across the fullest part of our bust, and we want to make sure that it's even across the back. Okay? So what you want to avoid, you don't want something like this, because that's not really measuring your bust. And you don't want something way too high up, because that's not measuring your bust either. I like to kind of shimmy it in place. Make sure my hair's out of the way, because that could add a couple inches. And then overlap it. And I'm coming in right at about 32 in this bra. So you want to take that measurement, take a look at your pattern. The Express tank goes from a 3XS size, which is a 31-inch bust, to a 3XL, which would be a 46 to a 47-inch bust. So, but figure out where you fall in the bust measurements. You can also measure your waist around the smallest part of your waist. And a good way to remember how to do that is just where that is to bend over. And where that crease is the smallest part of your waist. And then you can measure it around the fullest part of your hips. Hard to see that because I'm too close. Fullest part of your hips, and take that measurement into account as well. But as you can see, it doesn't go super low on my hips, and the overlap in the back, so if you're doing the pointed back option or the tulip hem option, the overlap in the back allows for a lot of flexibility in waist and hip measurements. So I wouldn't get too blend happy when it comes to this pattern. I would really try out a straight size unless you got some really drastic differences. Now the size that you do choose though in the waist and the hips will affect how much overlap you have. So if you, let's say you measure into a medium, but your hips are in the 2XL category. So your bust is a medium, your waist and your hips are in the 2XL category. Well, that might mean that you've got less overlap in the back. And if that's not comfortable to you, then you could blend so that you have more coverage there. So there's some flexibility and fit there as well. So it just kind of depends on where your measurements fall and what you want to do. And please feel free to ask me questions on the question thread or on my blog about sizing. I'm more than happy to answer those. Something else that you can do and that I'll be talking about tomorrow is adjusting the shoulders. So once we have our pattern cut out, if you feel like it's too low, the pattern is drafted to be fairly low in the armholes, not so low that you're showing a lot of side boob, but fairly low. If you feel like you want to bring that up a bit, you can just sew a larger seam allowance in the shoulders. So there's some options there as well. But that's just some things to consider when you're thinking about cutting out your size. Of course, you want to choose your option as well. So do you want the tulip back? This one is the tulip back. Or do you want the tie back that actually ties in the back, or the pointed hem option, which I haven't made but also enjoy seeing. So there are those three options that you can choose from. The tie on me tends to hit kind of low, so I don't find it a problem when I'm kind of laying on a mat or doing sit-ups or anything like that if you're planning on making a more athletic type of tank. But that is something to consider. The pattern is also drafted for a height of 5'7" or 5'8". I am not that tall, but I have a long torso. All my shortness is in my legs, so I don't adjust tops at all. But if you are short torsoed or shorter than that, or taller than that, you may want to add or subtract length from your pattern. Now, after you've selected your size and adjusted your pattern for height, if you're going to do so, we're going to take a look at some fabric choices. Now, the XPress tank has a lot of flexibility in terms of fabric, which makes it kind of fun. There's a lot of fabrics that'll work. So I'm going to show you a couple of different options. The first option is this athletic fabric. This pink athletic knit is from Sew English. It's fairly thin. I don't remember the exact weight on it, but I would say maybe 180 GSM or something like that. It's got some nice drape, which is nice. The fabric doesn't have to have drape, but if it does, it's just going to hang nicely. So that's something to think about. Now, stretch. It's important that your fabric have 50% two-way stretch. So what that means is that if you take 4 inches of your fabric and take it to your cutting mat and you stretch it, you want it to stretch to at least 6 inches. So that's 50% stretch. Okay, and good recovery is always important. This isn't a super tight fitting tank, but you want to, that's something that's kind of just for you to check out in terms of fabric quality. If you stretch something, does it go back? This one goes back really well. So that's great. This would be a great fabric, an athletic fabric. You can also make the XPress tank in cotton lycra. This has less drape. You can kind of see when I shake it. It's not quite as drapey, but it's got good stretch and it's really easy to work with as a bonus. So cotton lycra works. ITY, I think it stands for interlock twist yarn, or DTY, which is double twist yarn, is typically kind of a lightweight, somewhat slinky fabric. Usually has pretty good two-way stretch. This is something that would work really well, and that's what this tank that I'm wearing right now is made out of. So that's a good option. Rayon spandex is another great option. This would make for a really nice, breezy, lightweight tank, or bamboo is another good option. I have some MVC on the way from So English, and I think that that's going to be absolutely fantastic for it as well. And then finally, another good candidate would be something like double brushed poly. Everybody loves good double brushed poly. So that's another good option. I don't tend to love double brush poly in the summer because it gets really hot around here and it doesn't breathe well. But this tank does have a lot of open airiness. So if you love double brush poly in the summer, or you're going into a cooler environment, this would be great. The other thing I love about the XPress tank, I'll just mention really quickly, is that if I put a blazer over this XPress tank, you wouldn't be able to tell, but it was kind of slinky in the back, which I kind of love. So I think that it can make appropriate workwear as well. So those are some good fabrics. We've talked a little bit about sizing. Now I'm going to go to the flat pattern and show you some flat pattern adjustments. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on how to adjust for height, and how to take a look at the way that the armholes fit and things like that. So I'm going to see you back in just a second for that, and we'll get started. So now we're back, and I positioned the camera so you can see my cutting surface, so I've kind of got to bend down here, but you should have your pattern all laid out on your fabric. I like to use these kind of metal washer weights that my husband just picked up for me at the hardware store. They hold down my fabric really well. I also tend to trace my patterns on like medical exam paper because it's cheaper than the really fancy stuff that I use, sometimes the Swedish tracing paper, but the medical exam paper, it's thin, it's kind of like regular pattern tissue, but it's inexpensive, comes on a big roll. So that's what I've used, and I'm just going to put my washer weights out, make sure I don't have any bumps in my fabric, and make sure that my pattern piece is exactly on the fold like I want it to be. And then I'm going to grab my rotary cutter. I always cut out my patterns with a rotary cutter because they just make such a nice clean edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting. This is a really simple cut job. So just go into it here. Okay, so that's it. My pattern is all cut out, and there's no notches or markings for you to mark with this one. It's really nice and easy. So once you get it all cut out, you're done for the day, and we'll continue tomorrow. Now you might just want to blast ahead, and that's totally okay. I'm open to questions on tomorrow's activities as well, where we'll be sewing the shoulder seams and kind of assessing the fit and doing any kind of last minute adjustments. And then on the third day, we'll just be doing some hemming, and I'll be showing you a couple of tips and tricks for how I use my sewing machine and also my cover stitch to hem. Now hemming is always an option, so especially on this pattern, you could choose not to hem it. Someone already pointed out that sometimes the straps on the tank, some people's straps seem wider than others. And if you choose not to hem the tank, the straps are going to be wider than if you choose to take, you know, what is 3/8 out of each side, so 6/8 out of the pattern for hemming. So that's an option. If you already know that you want wider straps, that could be an adjustment that you make even before you cut. So you could just widen those straps just a bit. But otherwise, we're done for the day, and I'll see you back tomorrow.